What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today to break down a one-round 2023 Dynasty rookie mock draft with landing spots. If you guys were following the channel last offseason, you would have seen us do a ton of rookie mock drafts with landing spots. This will be the first one. I'm going to be using Luke Easterling's of the Draft Wire. I will link the full mock draft if you guys want to check it out down below in the description. But basically, today we're going to be doing a Dynasty rookie mock draft as if Luke Easterling's draft actually happened. That's where all the players went. That's the landing spots. That's the draft capital. So we're going to cover all that in today's video and talk about the landscape of the position if this were to actually happen. So if you guys enjoy at any point, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and leave any comments down below as well. Now let's hit the intro. Okay, so before we get into it, there's a couple reasons why we want to be doing exercises like this, where we take, somebody's mock draft who's connected to the league and what they're thinking, and basically do a dynasty rookie mock draft as if their picks happen. Because number one, draft capital is a very important part of these rookie profiles. And if we get a sense of where these players are going based on some of these mock drafts that we're reading, then we're going to know how strong the class is. Do we need to be buying picks, selling picks, etc.? Especially at the quarterback position, where we saw as recent as last year, a lot of the top projected quarterbacks fell outside of the first round, fell to the second, third, fourth round, fifth round, etc. So that's definitely a big part of why we're doing this, is because we want to get a sense of the quarterback draft capital and the other positions draft capital. Number two, they're also great practice for your rookie drafts, and they allow you to form opinions on players based on the specific landing spots and schemes and draft capitals and all that kind of stuff. And number three, they're just fun to do. So that's definitely why we're doing these today. So here were all of the fantasy relevant players that were selected in Luke's mock draft. And like I said, I will link the full mock draft down below. I don't want to be just stealing somebody's work and not giving them credit for it. So it's over at the Draft Wire. Go check it out. He does, if you guys are just fans of the NFL draft, he does great work. He used to cover the Buccaneers as well, so I'm very familiar with his work. But you guys can see the picks on the screen there. You can see Bryce Young went first overall to the Texans, CJ Stroud fourth overall to the Lions, so on and so forth. Anybody whose name is in green was drafted in the first round, and yellow in the second round. Not a ton of second round fantasy relevant players, but I will actually leave this condensed version to the right or left of me, depending on how I edit this, so you guys can keep track of the players still available on the board as we go throughout the mock draft. But we're going to get right into it. We're going to start with the 101. The 101 is Bijan Robinson. It would not change despite this landing spot, which I would consider probably not a great one. It's probably not the most ideal landing spot. 25th overall is where he was going in Luke's mock draft. Baltimore Ravens, the landing spot. So Bijan is an elite prospect. So for me, it doesn't really matter where he goes, what pick he is. As long as he's a first round running back and he goes to a team that is in the NFL, I really don't care what the backfield situation is of that team. Baltimore obviously has J.K. Dobbins in house, who next year will be 2 years removed from the ACL tear on the final year of his rookie contract. I think this would probably be very similar to the James Robinson, Travis Etienne situation a couple of years ago, where people would probably panic a little bit on Bijan Robinson. They'd probably undervalue the 101 a little bit, and maybe even potentially not even select them 101 consensus. And I think this would make the 101 a huge buy, because this does not change what I think about Bijan Robinson. He's the best running back prospect since Saquon Barkley. He has elite receiving chops. He has an elite profile, athleticism, all that good stuff out the wazoo. So I'm sure everybody wants Bijan to go to Philadelphia or to go to Las Vegas if Jacobs moves on in free agency, or to go to the Miami Dolphins. But, we also need to do mock drafts with the assessment where maybe he doesn't go to the most ideal landing spot. Maybe he's not a top 10 pick to the Philadelphia Eagles. Maybe he goes late first round to a team like the Baltimore Ravens. Nonetheless, he would still be my 101 in this draft class. 102 for me, based on this mock draft, is Anthony Richardson from Florida. And he goes 9th overall to the Carolina Panthers in Luke's mock draft here. And this is one of the hinging points of rookie drafts in 2023, because Anthony Richardson is a very, very polarizing prospect among NFL circles, among fantasy circles, for a couple of reasons. Number one, he is not a prototype, pro-ready type of quarterback right now. But if we're evaluating the kid's ability as a prospect, similar to what we've seen from a guy like Justin Fields this year, or what we saw from Trey Lance a couple of years ago, or Jalen Hurts, what he's turned into, we have a 6'4", 240-pound athletic freak of nature that if he goes top 10, that'll mean he'll have a great opportunity to be a long-term starter in the NFL. And obviously, Justin Fields is the easy example of somebody that we can point to. that it has worked out with. And Trey Lance also, to some degree, just from a value standpoint, we were valuing him as a borderline first round pick coming into the year. Obviously, getting injured didn't help, but even still, he's still holding peak value. And that's what you would have with a guy like Anthony Richardson. So for me, while Young and CJ Stroud are probably the better passing quarterback prospects and quarterback prospects in general, what Richardson can offer from a fantasy perspective is unmatched, because I'm assuming most of you guys play in 4 point per passing touchdown leagues where rushing yards are more valuable than passing yards. And what Anthony Richardson can provide is similar to that of a guy like Justin Fields, what we've seen from him this year. So he would be my 102. I believe the market would have the same reaction if this were to be the exact situation that plays out. 103 for me, I think you could go in a number of different directions. I think there'd be a large tier here, just given what transpired in Luke's mock draft. But I actually went with Jahmyr Gibbs here, 31st overall to the Philadelphia Eagles. So we have a guy with a very strong profile to begin with, Jahmyr Gibbs, Alabama running back. He's widely considered a top 5 player in rookie drafts right now, despite not knowing where he's going to go or where he's going to get drafted. Size being his major concern, but if he comes into the combine, he weighs 205, 208 or whatever. His receiving ability, his explosive ability, his athleticism, it makes him like a DeAndre Swift caliber running back prospect. And Jahmyr Gibbs in this scenario, getting first round draft capital, being paired with Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert the next 4 years, is bound to make him extremely, extremely valuable in rookie drafts on the open market, and probably vault him right up to a top 5 dynasty running back right before he even plays a NFL game, an NFL snap. So Jahmyr Gibbs would be my 103 in this scenario. 104 would be Bryce Young, who went first overall to the Houston Texans. Obviously, first overall pick has a lot of cachet. As I discussed, his fantasy output is limited to some degree as compared to a guy like Anthony Richardson. He pales in comparison, athleticism-wise, size-wise, tools-wise. He's a good player. He's a good prospect, but he's not a superstar caliber prospect. He'd also be part of a struggling franchise, rebuilding their offense, rebuilding their defense, probably not the right brain trust at the head of the organization as well. We have to imagine that Lovie Smith is probably one and done. They got to bring in an offensive coach to help develop a guy like Bryce Young. So while the quarterback equity is very important and having that job security of the first overall pick is very important, a guy like Bryce Young would probably slide a little bit if he went first overall to the Houston Texans, which is looking like probably what's going to happen in the actual draft. It's likely looking like a Tua Tagovailoa situation or a Trevor Lawrence situation at the ceiling range of outcomes. And while those guys are great quarterbacks now in Dynasty, they weren't necessarily very productive early on in their careers. And there was points in time where we were a little bit so-so on them because they played for bad franchises with struggling coaching staffs. And now that their teams are starting to put it together, they look like better prospects, but there's no guarantee that that would happen for a guy like Bryce Young. And I think Tua Tagovailoa is probably the perfect comparison for him, because even Tua Tagovailoa, the steps that he's taken so far this year, he's probably still only like a top 8 maximum dynasty quarterback, because he's not going to provide you with what Jalen Hurts or what Justin Fields have provided you with this year in terms of like a value accumulation piece. And I think the same would be true of a guy like Bryce Young. So we can get into the 105 for me, and the 105 would be Jordan Addison, who, if you guys have been following, our content, Jordan Addison's my wide receiver 1. So for me, this is just too good to be true. You get a proven separator, a elite, highly productive wide receiver prospect like Jordan Addison, who also passes the eye test on film, and you pair him with a superstar quarterback like Justin Herbert in an offense where Keenan Allen is 31 years old. Mike Williams would still be there for a bit longer, but this is just too perfect a fit, in my opinion, for him to slide in rookie drafts. And maybe if you wanted to go with the other quarterbacks over him, I understand. But top 20 draft capital, landing spot, opportunity to earn targets, already a stud wide receiver prospect, he would check every single box for me. So the 105 is where Jordan Addison lands. 106 would be Will Levis, who was another quarterback selected in the top 10 in this mock draft. You see Will Levis go 7th overall to the Indianapolis Colts. For those of you guys that have a ton of 2023 first round picks, this would be the best case scenario for you, because the price tag of first round picks in Dynasty Superflex rookie drafts has always been driven by the strength of the class. And we knew, a couple of years ago, this class was talked up as a potentially very good NFL draft class for 2023. And in Superflex leagues, the quarterback position is the biggest needle mover. So if we get 4 first-round quarterbacks, 2 of those guys being, Konami code guys like Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, these picks are going to become more valuable. It's going to push guys down the board. And also, the running back position is also very strong in this draft class as well, with guys like Bijan, with guys like Gibbs, and that pushes down other prospects as well. So you got a guy like Will Levis who has the tools. He has the first-round draft capital in this scenario. He goes 7th overall to the Indianapolis Colts. I would select him probably over CJ Stroud if this is how things would play out, because CJ Stroud, I'm going to talk about him in a second, but you got to imagine, whatever you think of Will Levis at the quarterback position, His play in 2022 was up and down. Everybody kind of knows the story with Will Levis by this point. But the bottom line is, in this scenario, he's a top 10 selected quarterback. That holds value at the very least. People are going to be drawn to that. You could also trade out of this pick. So even if you don't believe in Levis, this is where I believe he should go. And Levis has tools just like a guy like Justin Herbert did, who, by the way, his senior year at Oregon, a lot of people didn't like how he played either. So we're very wrong on quarterback prospects very often. So if you get a 7th overall pick, Will Levis, even if you don't believe in the guy, he belongs to go this high because this is where his market value is going to end up being. Because like I said, he's a toolsy quarterback who has the upside if he were to hit in the NFL, where he'd be surrounded with a great running back like Jonathan Taylor, a good wide receiver with Michael Pittman, a good offensive line in theory with the Indianapolis Colts. And also he'd have the opportunity to really, really skyrocket his value if he turns out to be a great quarterback, because he has I'm not going to call him Josh Allen, but he does have a great arm. He does have mobility and all that kind of stuff. So Will Levis would fit into me at 106 here. You could even take him 105 ahead of Jordan Addison. 107 would be CJ Stroud. Stroud comes off the board as the quarterback 4, which is a big fall from grace because, and we're talking fantasy football here. We know that he isn't offering much with his legs, so that hurts his potential to appreciate in value and provide a huge impact for your fantasy team. Stroud is basically like the Mac Jones of this class, and I think he's probably a better prospect than Mac Jones, but his main allure comes from the fact that he is a first-round quarterback with a good passing profile who's going to have job security, which outside the top like 15 quarterbacks or so in Dynasty, you don't actually have that job security factor. Once you get past, the Tua Tagovailoa, Trevor Lawrence range, Kenny Pickett range even, you're looking at, Kirk Cousins, who's up there in age, Derek Carr's, who are up there in age, who don't have a ton of job security. So that would be the main draw for CJ Stroud as a prospect. Fortunately, in this scenario, he goes 4th overall to the Detroit Lions, where even though he might have to wait a little bit to start behind a guy like Jared Goff, who's been playing well, he would have very good talent around him with Amon-Ra St. Brown, with Jameson Williams, with DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams, etc. So if this were the real draft, I'd say this pick 104, maybe even 103 to 107 range where I have these guys would probably be a large tier, and it would really go any which way. If you wanted to select Bryce Young 103, if you wanted to select CJ Stroud 103, I really wouldn't have any problem with you. This is just the way that I view these players given the landing spots that we have. The tough part is we don't know how to weigh a prospect like Will Levis, who's a little bit more volatile, might be a huge bust in the NFL, but has the elite tools to ascend himself into a first-round startup pick, versus a guy like CJ Stroud, who's a much safer prospect, but doesn't have the ability to get himself probably much higher than like the 3rd or 4th round of startup drafts, given the fact that he's not going to provide anything with his legs. So that's definitely something that we would have to weigh if this were to play out. 108 is Quentin Johnston. And like I mentioned already, getting a top 11 pick at wide receiver in Quentin Johnston at 108 is the benefit of having 4 first-round quarterbacks. Even though you might not like, let's say, Will Levis, you don't think he's a good prospect, he's going to go ahead of him in rookie drafts because he's a QB. And because he has the ability to accumulate a ton of value. Remember, we're not trying to outsmart the market. So even though I could be like, oh, Quentin Johnston was the higher rated prospect for me pre-draft, I'm going to draft him over Will Levis just because I feel like he's the better prospect and Will Levis is a bust. No, we can exploit the market. If you think that Quentin Johnston belongs to go ahead of Will Levis straight up, then you trade down in the spot where you would draft Will Levis and you draft Quentin Johnston at that point later on in the draft. The top 10 selected quarterbacks that I have in this mock draft, that all 4 of which went top 10 in the NFL draft, will go top 8 in superflex rookie drafts just by the very nature that they are quarterbacks in a superflex or a 2 QB league, leaving a perfect fit Quentin Johnston to go to the Jacksonville Jaguars, play with a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence, who has a huge arm, who would have a loaded cast of characters, by the way, if this were to play out, where you'd have Quentin Johnston, Calvin Ridley, and Christian Kirk to throw to, along with Evan Ingram, along with Travis Etienne out of the backfield. Safe to say if this happened, then the Jacksonville Jaguars would be well set up for the future. So moving on to the 109, we have Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Again, 109 Jaxon Smith-Njigba is also money in the bank. He could have easily gone higher than this, but he slides because he has borderline first-round draft capital at 29th overall in an offense where he'd presumably be behind Justin Jefferson. And this would be great news for Kirk Cousins, of course. And JSN would likely get the Devontae Smith treatment, the T. Higgins treatment, the Garrett Wilson treatment, and actually the Justin Jefferson treatment a couple years ago, because as the second you get a talented young wide receiver prospect that goes to a situation that's suboptimal, suddenly people are bypassing him for running back prospects and other worse wide receiver prospects who got better landing spots. And I think the same would be the case for JSN if this were to actually play out in real life. But this is how I would value him personally. 110, you see Michael Mayer going off the board. I wasn't doing this as a tight end premium type of format, but a top 15 pick at tight end. He went 14th overall to the Green Bay Packers in this mock draft. is capital that pushes Michael Mayer from a very good tight end prospect to an elite tight end prospect. You get a guy that goes top 15 in the NFL draft at this position. I'm not too concerned with Green Bay's quarterback situation. That's not why I'm investing in this. I'm concerned with the insulation possibility of a 14th overall pick tight end who had as good of a prospect profile as Michael Mayer. I guarantee if Michael Mayer has, let's say, a Pat Freiermuth start to his career with 14th overall draft capital, we're talking about the Dynasty tight end 2 just behind Kyle Pitts midway through his rookie season. Like, he would easily climb that quickly in value, and at a position that is so void of good options, even if he struggles right away, he could still hold value, similar to what we've seen from guys like TJ Hawkinson, from guys like Noah Fant, who, even though they haven't produced at the level we expected when they came out of school, they're still able to hold value because first round pick capital at tight end definitely matters. Moving on to the 111 of this draft, I have Jalen Hyatt. He's definitely going to be a polarizing prospect. He's kind of this year's Jameson Williams, only to a lesser extent. He's a speed demon. He wasn't all that productive his first 2 years. Until he had good quarterback play with Hendon Hooker. But the NFL values speed. We know this about the NFL. They drafted Henry Ruggs 11th overall, Jalen Waddle 6th overall. They like fast receivers, and he likely will be drafted high merely as a result of the Dolphins' success as well, because we know this is a copycat league. They're going to see the speed that the Dolphins built on offense and want that for themselves. And I think the New York Giants would actually be a great spot for him to command targets, considering they're starting literal nobodies like Isaiah Hodgins and Richie James and stuff right now, Darius Slayton, and Wan'Dale Robinson is going to be recovering from the ACL tear. So I think Jalen Hyatt would be a great fit. First round draft capital for a solid wide receiver prospect definitely warrants him going towards the back end of round 1. And then finally, closing out this rookie draft, we have the 112, who is Josh Downs, who is the only non-first round draft capital player that I have making the list here. But in this scenario, he gets top 40 draft capital to the Carolina Panthers, who theoretically would be building around their young quarterback, Anthony Richardson, who they selected at 9th overall in this draft. Another weapon to pair with DJ Moore. It looks like a fun offense in the making. They would just need, of course, the guy to actually architect the offense during the coaching cycle, hire an offensive-minded coach, or whatever the case may be. So that is the end of the rookie mock draft using landing spots, 2023 rookie mock draft. As I said, let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. Some of the guys that I didn't talk about anybody that wasn't selected in Luke's 2-round mock draft. So I could have talked about Sean Tucker. I could have talked about Zach Charbonnet, Blake Corum, Zach Evans, Tank Bigsby, and the rest of the running back draft class. Some of the other wide receivers and quarterbacks that I didn't break down either. But these guys didn't go off the board in these first 2 rounds of this mock draft. And I would assume a lot of those guys would go off the board in round 3 if that's how the actual NFL draft worked out. But that would definitely be something that we would need to take into account, is that some of these running backs are not getting super, super high draft capital. Tucker specifically, who I consider to be one of the elite running back prospects in this class. If he goes on day 3, or if he goes even in the 3rd round, that would definitely hurt his NFL draft prospects and his rookie draft prospects as a result. So I didn't discuss a couple guys that actually did go in this mock draft. Darnell Washington, who went 20th overall to the Tennessee Titans. Rashee Rice, who went 32nd to Houston, which is the top of the 2nd round because the Dolphins forfeited their 1st round pick. Hendon Hooker and Cameron Ward, 2 2nd-round quarterbacks who would go to New Orleans and Washington respectively in this scenario. Definitely those guys are interesting. They'd probably fill out the early portion of the 2nd round as well. So that being said, like I said, that is the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed, leave a like down below, comment any of your thoughts down below, subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you want to hear more in-depth breakdowns of these players, I've done other 2023 rookie mock drafts that I'll link in the cards and in the playlist down below if you want to go check those out for the in-depth breakdown of the prospects themselves, because mostly I was focused on draft capital and where they ended up in this video. And we'll definitely be doing a ton more of these as the rookie season, as the dynasty season gets further into effect, as we close out the actual fantasy football season. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. Stay tuned and be subscribed to the channel to make sure you don't miss anything. Check out the Patreon for more dynasty rookie content. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.
Why you need the money?